This is a 2024 Mazda CX-90, and I've driven this car already. I've actually driven a couple of these already, but this is the first chance I've gotten to drive it and experience it in the more usual way that I test cars. So I really wanted to take one more look at it and see how it felt in those circumstances. But because I have already tested this car, there would be a lot of repeating myself if I were to do a full review. So if you want to see my full review on this particular car, which is a 3.3 liter Turbo S Premium Plus model, the top trim out of 11 trims, the top trim of the brand new Mazda CX-90, I have a link to it right up there and also in the description. I highly encourage you to check that out. This review is going to focus a bit more on just the subjective stuff. What does this car feel like to drive? And also a couple more objective things like, will my bike fit in the cargo area? And finally, what's this thing handle like when it's dry outside? Because when I got the chance to drive this car before, it was in San Francisco and it was very, very wet. So yeah, there were some limitations. But a real brief summary, the 2024 Mazda CX-90 is a replacement of the Mazda CX-9, which was their three-row SUV. And even though it is a 2024 model year car, it is already in dealerships now. This is Mazda's biggest car, and it is also Mazda's flagship car, and it is also Mazda's most powerful car. And me, I'm Robin Warner, an experienced engineer and magazine editor, and very happy to be in the dry in this car. I review all kinds of cars, from a $25,000 Ford Maverick to a $425,000 Rolls-Royce Cullinan. I'll happily jump into Honda Accords, BMW M3s, and Porsche 911 GT3s. And I have fun every time. Please subscribe and join me. Real quick on pricing. There is a large spread of prices for this car. It has more than a $20,000 span between its least and most expensive trim level. This is the top trim. It costs over $60,000. I'll put the exact price up on the screen right now so you can check that out. So that makes this far from the least expensive three-row SUV you can get. But there were a couple things I didn't get a chance to show you in my initial walk around. So let me quickly pull over and show you around and inside this car just a little bit more. I have driven the 2024 Mazda CX-90, as I already told you, but I have not yet gotten a chance to see what the cargo space is actually like and if my bike fits. And it's also not raining. So let's take another quick close look at this car and then we'll get back to driving it. Key fob, buttons, here's the amount of space you get behind the third row. Completely adequate, really, if you think about this size of SUV with all three rows up. You do get a little bit more storage underneath, and you can easily fold these down. But I wanted to quickly pull out my tape measure to show you exactly how much space you get on the floor. So that is 21 inches deep in the center and about 44.5 inches wide across, so a little bit less than 4 feet wide. But that is with all three rows up, and they are, of course, quite easy to fold. Because this is the 6-passenger layout, you now have seating for 4 and much more cargo space. I'll go ahead and put the cubic feet up on the screen for you to check out, but that also means that you get more than 4 feet of depth and the same 44.5 inches across. So that's a fair amount of cubic space, and you've got a pretty nice deep opening, and the loading floor is a little highish. You got about 32 inches from the ground to the loading floor. That's not too bad, but you know, ample space. And of course, the second row does easily fold as well. And now we have more than 7 feet, about 85 inches to the back of the front seats when they're set to be comfortable for me. I am 5'11" tall, or 181 centimeters, by the way, and the same 44.5 inches across. My bike is 65 inches long, so I'm sure it'll fit quite easily, but let me show you. There you go. Yeah, easy fit, no problem at all. This is a large framed bike, 65 inches long, 42 inches tall, and it fits in real easily. So there you go. You can fit a bike in the back of your Mazda CX-90, probably two if you're strategic about it. And if you want to see a more detailed walk around, I did do that when I got to drive this car the first time around. I do have a link in the description, but I'm pretty antsy to get back to driving this thing to tell you a little bit more about how it feels. All right, let me tell you a couple quick things about this powertrain. This is the top powertrain. It is called the 3.3 Turbo S. There's a 3.3 Turbo, same basic engine, but it runs on regular gasoline and makes less horsepower. This one runs on premium, but makes 340 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque. It is also a hybrid vehicle, a mild hybrid vehicle. It is a 48 volt system and actually technically 44.4 volts. Anyway, that helps with really low speed takeoffs and things like that to give you smooth launches, even though that Mazda's in-house transmission, which is an 8-speed automatic transmission that they built, does not have a torque converter. Usually something like a torque converter is necessary to get smooth launches from a standstill, but not here because you have the electric motor that can engage and get this car moving easily from 0 speed, no trouble. So that's a nice little advantage. It also helps with fuel economy. I'll go ahead and put fuel economy up on the screen right now so you can see those numbers. But I want to talk a little bit more about what this powertrain feels like. So I mentioned it has an in-house 8-speed automatic transmission. That means that Mazda didn't buy it from a supplier. They designed it and built it themselves. And they did that because they wanted it to be a more slender transmission and it could be a bit longer as a result. And doing that means it fits in the chassis better without interrupting space in the cabin, and it gives them full control of exactly how it works. And I have to say, it works quite well. It has nice smooth shifts, but it also has fast shifts when you need them to, especially when you put it in sport mode. You do have 3 driving modes in this car: normal, sport, and off-road driving. And it pairs with a fantastic engine. First of all, inline-6 engines are a naturally balanced engine, meaning that this engine configuration naturally doesn't have vibrations as it runs. And it just emits a really nice, smooth exhaust tone as you get going. And Mazda tuned the exhaust nicely. Yes. In fact, they tuned it really nicely. That is a nice, smooth, yet snarly sound you get from the exhaust. I really like that. As inline-6 engines go, this is not the smoothest. BMW and Mercedes build a lot of inline-6 engines, and they are really smooth, buttery things. This isn't quite to that level. But again, this is a mainstream product, not a premium product. And that means we are much closer to mainstream prices. So this is kind of the bargain way to get yourself in a nice, smooth, turbocharged inline-6 engine. And I really appreciate that Mazda made that decision. And Mazda made that decision for dynamic reasons to a certain extent. This engine is mounted longitudinally under the hood, and because it's an inline, not a V, it takes up less space on either side, and that gave Mazda plenty of room to put in a double wishbone front suspension, which is fantastic for handling characteristics. So if you're a driving enthusiast at all, or a huge driving enthusiast nut like me, you will appreciate this. I appreciate this a whole heck of a lot. And even if you're not much of an enthusiast at all, you'll just feel nice, good feel from the car as you drive it, good responses when you're trying to turn corners, and a nice and stable feel when you're just going along for a ride. But when it comes to the handling characteristics, the powertrain plays a role as well. This is an all-wheel drive machine. All Mazda SUVs are all-wheel drive. And this is a rear-wheel drive biased all-wheel drive system. That means that it will tend to send more of the power to the rear axle, to the rear wheels instead of the front, which means it's easier to use the throttle to balance the car going through a corner than it would be if it were a front-wheel drive based system. And Mazda tuned the differentials to behave that way to benefit drivers that like going through corners nicely. Again, especially when you're in the sport driving mode. But it's also not slow in a straight line. I did get a chance to test it. Let me show you that right now. All right, time for an acceleration test. In fact, time for 2 acceleration tests. I'm going to do it once, just stomping on the gas from a dead stop, and a second time, brake torquing first, see if we feel any difference. But I think it's going to be good either way. Okay, first one, coming to a complete stop. Stomp on the gas. There we go. I love inline-6 engines and good quick shifts. Wow, that was nice. Good, quick, clean shifts from Mazda's in-house 8-speed automatic transmission. 340 horsepower, 369 pound-feet of torque. The launch wasn't great, but it wasn't bad considering everything. We are in the sport driving mode, so that did give the transmission and the engine throttle map a little bit of encouragement to give us a healthy start. But let's try it again with brake torquing, see if it's any better. All right, launch number 2 with brake torque, coming to a complete stop. Foot hard on the brake. Not much over 1,000 RPM off the brake. Not much different, a little bit more aggressive, but then we get moving nicely just as before. Yeah. Despite this being a big 3-row SUV, we have good pull from this nice and smooth 340 horsepower, 3.3 liter inline-6 engine, turbocharged of course. 369 pound-feet of torque of course does not hurt, but the brake torquing did not seem to make much of a difference. So yeah, there you go. Pretty much just slam on the gas with this thing if you want to get moving. All right, I've already talked a bit about handling, and I did do a handling test when I was out in California to drive this car, but now I finally got to do a handling test completely in the dry. And spoiler alert, probably no surprise, I enjoyed it. Let me show you that right now. All right, time for another handling test, this time in the dry. And we're going to see how this Mazda CX-90 feels. We do have a longitudinally laid out engine, which is rear wheel drive biased all wheel drive system. We have double wishbone front suspension, multi-link rear suspension, and we have lovers of the Miata tuning said suspension. So this is a big SUV, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Let's see how it goes. Oh, by the way, I am in the sport driving mode once again. Yep. Inline-6 engines. Very, very good. That's more grip than I expected, and not very much body roll either. Not much understeer either. This thing feels good. Oh yeah, we leaned into that corner a little bit more. We got a little bit more body roll there, but the body is really well controlled, and I've got good precise steering, really well weighted steering, and a pretty fast steering rack as well. So turn-in response is a lot better than I expected in something this size. Yep, handles the undulations in the road well. Rear end feels stable, but we're not getting tons of understeer here. And we're getting good feedback here. Oh man. That's a nice growl from the inline-6 too. Yeah, even the brakes feel good. This is a playful machine. This is a 200-inch long playful machine. This is a 6-passenger up to 8-passenger, depending on how it's configured, playful machine. This thing is fantastic. Mazda really knocked this one out of the park. This is a big 3-row SUV, and yet it is genuinely enjoyable to drive. You feel it in the engine power and the way that's mapped. You feel it in the differentials and how they work together, and how you can add power as you're exiting the corner to keep the chassis balanced. You feel it in the chassis balance generally. There's not that much understeer in the car, and you feel it with the body control. This is a well-controlled body. I still think it's perfectly comfortable, and yet it's a well-controlled body. They did a really, really good job with all of it. I got a chance to speak with an expert on how this car handles and why. I have that up on the screen right now for you to check out, as well as in the description. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the nuances of exactly what makes this Mazda CX-90 handle so well, you should definitely check that out. But trust me, this thing handles really well. This is by far the best handling mainstream crossover SUV you can get, by far. I mean, you got to go into Porsches before you really start finding a competitor. So how does this car ride? How does it feel just going down the road? If Mazda puts so much emphasis into handling, does that make this ride a bit on the harsh side? Well, to some, maybe, yeah. It is stiffer than some three-row SUVs out there, to be sure, and it will not float over corners quite as well as other cars, especially if you're on a bumpier road. That being said, for me, this is perfectly compliant, and I think plenty comfortable for a family to just go on a road trip, or if you need to commute to work or whatever else. For me, the compromise between ride and handling is a really good one that Mazda made. Moreover, the slightly stiffer structure makes it easy for it to feel sure-footed throughout, and you feel like you have control of the car in a lot of different situations. And that's true on roads like this or on the interstate. I did test that out before, but I did want to test it again. Let me show you that right now. All right, time for a quick stint on the interstate. But real quick before we get on the road, I wanted to show you one little thing. On the 3.3 liter Turbo S Premium Plus, you can choose between standard distance cruise control or full assisted driving cruise control right here. And you can start with this. So this still gives you adaptive cruise control. It still adjusts distance, but this one adds the steering assist, the lane centering, and all that kind of stuff. And the graphic up here changes when you're in the standard distance versus the full driver assistance, and I'll show you that real quick once we're on the road. So let's get on the road. But first, it does look like I have an opportunity for one little more handling test. Yeah. Yes. A three-row SUV that can handle. Very nice. Okay, to the actual highway test. Okay, I do have the standard adaptive cruise control set, and I want to show you the graphic you see on the instrument cluster as a result. There you go. Now I will switch it to the full driving assist system, and there is that graphic. You see the green lines in between the lane that the car graphic is in. That shows you that you have lane centering to help you out, and that it will do some assistance for you. Generally speaking, that is a very cool graphic. You could see that it showed blocks to the left of the car. That's because we're in the far right lane. If I were in the middle lane, it would show you what's on both sides of you. So it gives you 3 lanes worth of information in terms of graphics and blocks. And if you have something coming up right in front of you, you get another vehicle looking here. I'll show you that real quick. See, now we have a vehicle right in front of us and some on the left as well. It's a very cool graphic, and the only manufacturer I've seen do better is Mercedes-Benz in the EQE, and that graphic is even more slick than this, but that car is also a bit more expensive. Generally speaking, I mentioned it when we were doing the handling test, this is a stiffer ride than many three-row crossovers out there, but to me, it's still plenty compliant for what you need on normal roads. It goes over bumps and heaves in the road with no problem at all. It's a touch sharper than other cars, but in my opinion, nothing about it is harsh or punishing. This is generally a very quiet interior. They did a good job to isolate cabin noise and wind noise to keep it a pleasant experience in here. I think this would be a perfectly reasonable, good road trip car, and if you happen to be going through some nice curvy roads on your way in a road trip, you'd have more fun than anybody else, for sure. part of what's cool about driving this car on the road is all the information it showed, and there's a lot of cool technology built into this car. I actually got a chance to interview a technology expert about that stuff. I'll go ahead and put the link right there and have it in the description as well. So, who is this Mazda CX-90 built for? I think it's built for a lot of different people. Honestly, there are a lot of strengths in this car. I've driven it a fair amount now and really enjoyed being behind the wheel of it in a lot of different circumstances. It's perfectly pleasant to drive when you're just going through the city or running errands or things like that. But you can genuinely enjoy yourself in this thing. Seriously, you got to get into one of the nicer BMW SUVs or a Porsche SUV to really have that much level of fun. And we're talking about something that can fit up to 8 people depending on how it's configured. I absolutely love that. And I think that a lot of other people would like that as well. In fact, I think some non-driving enthusiasts might slowly get into driving a little bit more if they owned one of these. It's really that enjoyable. So if you're an enthusiast and you have a pretty healthy budget for your family car, this is an easy choice. I think it's a good looking car. I think it's a comfortable car. I think it has a lot of good, well thought out technology in this car. And critically, I think it's an excellent driving car. The one caveat to all of this is it's not an inexpensive car. The base price for the base CX-90 is over $40,000, and as I showed you, this one is over $60,000. So it's not really a mainstream car. It's actually kind of a tweener. This is kind of going in between the premium products and the mainstream products in terms of price. But to be fair, it is also going in that direction and probably closer to the premium side when it comes to the amenities and luxuries and technologies offered, and when it comes to the driving experience. So, if you're in a position where you can go in between, I think there's a lot of reasons to do it. I'm Robin Warner. Thank you for watching. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Doing so helps me out a lot, and I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you're interested in something like this, well, I have been lucky enough to drive a Porsche SUV as well. One I like in particular is the Macan T. That one is definitely a bit smaller than this, but it is an absolute riot to drive. And actually, they're pretty close in price, so you should definitely check that out. And I've reviewed a whole bunch of stuff by now. Something's gonna pop up on the screen next to me. Hopefully it's something you're interested in, and if you do end up watching it, I definitely hope you like it. Okay, goodbye for now.